Hello and welcome back to Analysing Avatar. It's that time of the week, Chris, where we watch an episode of that show, Avatar The Last Airbender, and then talk about it for 45 minutes to an hour. You excited?
Not with that sales pitch, no.
Was that not enthusiasm, Chris? Was that? Did I not sell it? Does this not sound like the most compelling audio you've ever heard?
But it'd be so simple. You just have to perk up a bit. Like, it's that time of the week again, Chris. You and I, we watch an episode of Avatar. We talk about it for 45 minutes to an hour. Like, do you hear that?
So what you're saying, Chris, is it wasn't the words I chose, but the way in which I said it.
Well, they weren't great, but the lack of enthusiasm made it worse.
Couldn't even give me that.
Well, no. I mean, we watch an episode. That's like me pitching the podcast to someone I don't want to listen to. That's what that is.
Anyway,
I mean, we watched an episode of Avatar, and then we review it.
What can I say, Chris? I've been recording daily episodes of Infinity Train this week, and I am burnt the fuck out. I am at about 15%.
Well, I look forward to hearing them.
That's all you're getting. Oh no, they got 100%. This is where I copped out.
But it wouldn't have. I'm very intrigued because last time there was an episode like this, in my opinion. That's like, you know, obviously there's a particularly big moment in there for the two of the characters, but you know, there's a lot of comedy. And last time we watched an episode where I was like, oh, you know, it's you know, story of the week. It's some comedy. I really enjoyed that. I'm quite taken by that. I came on and it was like, yeah, a lot of people hate this. I was like, oh. So I'm very intrigued as to whether actually you're speaking with an enthusiasm that matches general feelings about this episode, or whether I'll happily be wrong on that.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Chris. I fucking love this episode. I think this is
great.
This is
well,
one
fucking tell your voice.
I told you, Chris. 15%. It's all you're getting. I'll negotiate up to 20 at best. Maybe once I've had a sip of my tea and I've got some caffeine in my veins.
You even got caffeine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. I should be perkier. This is a KFC come down, is what this is. I had KFC for lunch, so I'm bloated and miserable now, as anyone is when they finish fast food.
Yeah, but you and I have that extra, like, you know, most people feel a bit dodgy after eating fast food. You and I both take the approach of, like, if we're eating something bad, like, you know, go all the way. So, like, you've probably eaten enough KFC to not only feel groggy from the KFC, but also feel bad about your life choices.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll put it this way. It was 2 hot wings too many, is what I found that today's limit. Yeah. The limit varies day to day and depending on what I'm having, but I underestimated the heft of a Zinger burger and got hot wings on the side, and I got far too many hot wings on the side. It was too. It was precisely too many. Like, if I'd have had 2 less, I think I'd be. I think this would be a very different podcast. Anyway, right. Let's get on with it. So this one is. I nearly called it The Tale of Two Lovers, but it's not. It's called Cave of Two Lovers.
The Cave of the Two Lovers.
I think it's called The Cave of Two Lovers, isn't it? Is it not?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the episode, for those who do not recall, where they're on their way to Omashu, and their route via air, as they normally go, is comically blocked by the Fire Nation. Never a problem before or after, but for the joke here, it works really well. So they're forced to try this route that they hear about through these sort of traveling nomad hippie guys who are singing songs about how there's a secret tunnel. Catchy goddamn song. I think in a down at 20 to 50% mode, this podcast would have opened with me being like, secret tunnel.
I was expecting that, actually.
Yeah. Through the mountain, secret tunnel. Anyway, didn't do that. Except for just there, where you guys.
That's what you could have won.
Where you tricked me into 50% for like a minute. Anyway, So yeah, it's they go through the secret tunnels to try and get to Omashu, and it's the Cave of Two Lovers. So it's there's a whole romantic subplot that's sort of about how the cave gets out. They end up getting split up, and there's two very different solutions to the same problem, both equally funny and entertaining, and a little bit of Katang. I don't know what you call the ship of Katara and Aang. And then on the other side of it,
People must have been losing their minds when I was talking about shipping last week. They
Yeah.
must have just been like, you wait.
You wait 1 week, mate. You'll get what you want. So the other side of the story, for those who don't remember, is that Zuko and Iroh find themselves taken in by an Earth Kingdom family to recover after the incident. Both after the incident last week, but also after Iroh poisons himself in the attempt to drink delectable tea, which is another thing we'll come back to, I'm sure. And they show them great kindness, but in the end, they move on and they don't particularly respond with kindness because Zuko ends up stealing their...
They nick a horse, Dan, is what happens here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not... I mean, I was going to say that I think the hesitation there wasn't the action. He does, of course, steal the horse, but it's not a horse, is it? It's a weird Avatar... bird, horse, whatever it is, hybrid creature. Like, it's one of the weird hybrid creatures this show tends to just have and never really address. Yeah, like, at one point in this episode, they're attacked by wolf bats, and that's, like, just the case.
Yeah, and they're just... Because it did feel a bit like... And then I just started going... Because I thought... I was like... Have we had hybrid animals before? And then I was kind of like, we must have. And
that's all we've had.
Taking it in.
They literally, there's never been a normal animal in the show. It's a platypus bear or a, whatever. And looking at it, it looks like a bird horse, the one that they steal. It's got a horse's top half of its head, but it's also got a beak and it's got 2 legs. It looks a bit like a chocobo from the Final Fantasy series, if anyone knows what one of those looks like. But anyway.
As you've said,
yes,
I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was funny. I thought, obviously we'll talk about the good ship, Katang or whatever we're calling it. Has it got a name? Must have a name.
The thing is, I'll Google it for you. Obviously, I don't want you to Google it in case you get any spoilers. But it is funny, isn't it? Because like I'm sure because we record these 10 weeks in advance. I think I called it Katang as a joke last week, not knowing the actual fandom's name for the ship.
Yeah.
I suspect that if I'm wrong, it was a video with about 1,000 angry comments. And I'm kind of enjoying the idea that obviously nothing we can do about that. And they're just going to have to wait a week until we correct it. I will Google the proper name for the Katara Aang ship. But carry on with your thoughts.
Yeah, so that but it's just in the vein. It's just a riot. Like it's just full of great comedy. We have Iroh turning around and just being like, "I ate it," and he's covered in the results of the thing. We have all the comedy with Sokka and the band and how much they're frustrating him. Like at the end, where she's like, "Why is your face red?" And then he just says something and he just slaps his head.
It's when he says, "Hey guys, I don't want to draw your attention to it, but I think that kid might be the Avatar."
Yeah, we got some awesome music. Like honestly, I almost don't have too much to analyze because I was just like, that was a good time. Like I just thoroughly enjoyed watching it. I loved the story. I'd almost see like a half an hour prequel or indeed like a movie of the two lovers. That whole thing seems epic.
Yes.
Like we've got secret tunnels. We got schmooching in the dark.
There's a very sort of a Romeo Juliet style, like two families disapproving of a love. Like, it's got proper
her
scale
going
to it.
Nuts. I imagine her going nuts and being like, "If you want to fight somewhere else. We're building a new city," and people are like, "Way!" And then maybe there's, it doesn't sound as good now. Now that I've pitched it like that, and then the people, Spielberg, go, "Way!"
Spielberg's tapping his watch, just going, "Yeah." Do they?
Yeah, but I loved it, mate. I had a great time. What's the ship name?
It is Katang.
Oh, nice. There you go.
So I'll be honest with you. I'm sad that I got it right because the reality is I probably got it right on the basis of, obviously, there are only a few different ways you can smush two names together, number one. But number two, there's a chance I've heard it before, right? Like, within the fandom and just sort of taken it in subconsciously and done it. The reason I'm disappointed, Chris, is because I would rather have been wrong for the entertainment value of the angry comments than correct, where now I don't have any angry comments. And everyone was just like, yeah, that's what it's called. Which is a much less fun message to receive, if I'm honest. So,
I mean, I've sent you angry comments about your attitude this week, if that helps. If you're after about your tone,
about my attitude. Oh, I'm being sent to the principal's office. He didn't like my attitude during the podcast. Said I should give more than 15%. I said, fuck you, I ate a boatload of KFC.
Yeah. You imagine that.
It's as good an excuse as any.
One of the most, I don't know if I should, fuck it, I don't think well, I won't name them anyway, but a place I used to work, I went home with a bit of a stomach thing, and it was one of those places that when you then return after being ill, you have to have like a post-sickness debrief. Yes. It's insane. Where I work now doesn't have that, and I don't think actually I've worked anywhere else that has that.
Quite a few companies do that as a method of like discouraging you from pretending to be sick, because at some point you'll have to have a sit down and talk about it. And I guess there is like a privacy thing. I think you can sort of defer and not answer the questions, but companies do it as a. I know a couple of companies that do that. Sadly, including the one I currently work for.
Well, I'm sort of sat there, and she's like, and being the person in question,
they call it a return to work form.
That was it.
Yeah,
that's it. And we're doing my return to work, and she. We will talk about Avatar, by the way, people. We'll get our KFC, and this is our sort of our chatter. We'll get that done here. We're just doing it up top this week because we need to re-energize Dan. And she goes, what? So what happened? And I was like, "What, you saw what happened? I had to rush to the loo, and then decided it was probably best if I go home." So this was Monday. Yeah, I mean it was yesterday. Yeah. What happened on Sunday? I was writing a play at the time. I was like, I did some writing, and then da. So what'd you have for dinner? I said, oh well, because I wrote quite late. We had like Papa John's. We had some pizza. And she goes, And because you were late eating the pizza, the takeaway pizza, did you eat it quite quickly? And I was like, maybe. And she's like, so it was one of the most condescending conversations I've ever had in my life. And she's like, so do you think on reflection, it's not a good idea to eat pizza late and eat it really quickly and have it be kind of takeaway pizza? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm being schooled on
that's
on
so inappropriate.
Eating.
Okay, that particular person was way over the line. Look, I'll put my cards on the table. I have had to perform a return to work for members of staff where I work because it is a company policy, and it is quite simply the way I frame it is, we're just checking you're all right. Then everything's good. Any questions you don't want to answer, don't answer, and off we go. It's that simple. I'm checking a box. I'll be as quick and painless as I can. Do you mind talking about why what the problem was, whether you saw medical? Particularly, we don't tend to do them for 1 day absences. We tend to do them for like if they've been off for a couple of days. Then it's like we're double checking that you have seen a doctor. You know what it is. It's not and it's partly framed as a wellness check as much as the reality is it's also partly a deterrent to stop them from calling in sick when they're not. But I like to try and at least make it useful in that it's framed as a wellness check, and it is kind of how the company tries to position it too. But I would never. Those questions, Chris, are outrageous.
It's madness, isn't it? Absolute madness.
So direct, so personal.
And I'm now worried that I'm doing that with you and your KFC. So did you think it was a good idea to eat a KFC before the podcast?
You've returned to the podcast, and you're at 15%. Is that correct, Dan? Yes, it is. And what did we do before the podcast? Well, I ate a KFC. And how many hot wings did you eat with your KFC? Well, it was too many. Too many, you say? Now, do you think it might have been better if you'd ordered less hot wings? Well, yeah, that's what too many means. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. You have a
Yeah,
power
see,
I didn't have 2 hours ago, mate.
Again, but that's the approach. That's again our approach to fast food. It's like, I know if I'm eating a Domino's on the Saturday, probably best I don't plan anything for the Sunday, and that is the choice I choose to make. Right, Avatar, Dan.
Avatar,
right, so Katang. Good stuff. It's sweet, endearing.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it was kind of odd because when it was clear they were doing that, kind of going that way with this episode, I was like, ooh, last week I was talking about how it seemed quite brotherly, seemed quite sisterly, seemed quite family orientated. But I really think that was probably me just overanalyzing the word love.
I just think in that context, because she was talking about, and I couldn't say this last week really because I knew obviously this episode was next, so it was kind of like I was in a bit of a tricky situation. When you were talking about that last week and about how the use of the word love didn't elicit a response from Aang, I think it's because they were just trying to focus us on the idea that it wasn't just Katara, it was the people that love him. So as a result, it's kind of sidesteps that issue, so you don't have to bog your episode down with also dealing with his feelings for Katara. It's more about the people who love you, the wider we, those of us who know you and like you and love you and respect you and want you to do well are worried about this thing. Separates it a little bit from the Katang of it all, the good ship Katang, sailing away. So it's one of those things where it had been clear in previous episodes that he has some feelings for her. I mean, particularly do you remember the was it Madame Wu episode where he was trying to sort of coax that, and so it's not gone anywhere. It's just they sidestepped it a bit last week, which I can see how that might have been misleading. But obviously, this episode sort of puts us back on track with whatever they're doing with that story. Did you? So were you were surprised then by the sound of it?
I guess surprised that they were doing it. If you'd have, I'm not surprised they did some Katang. But if you were to say to me before last week,
that's just fun to say.
Like taking out of place that discussion, when do you think we're getting some Katang stuff, if any? I probably wouldn't have said episode 2. Like that's I suppose what surprised me. But I wasn't. I certainly wasn't upset to see it. I thought it was very sweet, and I thought even just like the way the episode started with them all chilling out, but you had kind of Aang and Katara training with each other,
yes,
and Sokka just lounging about, and then there was even I think a reference to underwear and stuff. It felt very much like a clear these characters are older than they were last year, so it doesn't surprise me that we then got some Katang, because it very much felt like they're going through puberty, I guess. Maybe I don't know how old they are, but do you know what I mean? It felt like they were closer to adults than even Aang. Aang, look how seriously Aang was taking his training, whilst he did amusing, because this episode is full of amusing moments. While he did the octopus thing, he took the rest of it seriously. Whereas series 1, he's all whiny, moany, being trained.
Yeah, and also maybe not even whiny, maybe more excitable to go do something more interesting to him. He was his enthusiasm. He'd be like, "Let's go ride some penguins," or you know what I mean. He'd be interested in maybe playing about in a different way rather than focusing on the training. But he does seem to have focused. Again, you could. I think somebody would be right to question how Katara became a master so much quicker than him, but to the point where she could train him. But you kind of just go with it. They both got to the North Pole at the same time, so you figured they'd be about at the same level. But I guess they've established Katara is almost a bit of a waterbending prodigy of sorts.
Yeah, one prodigy. 2, they established that she was taking the scrolls and reading them and learning them a lot more seriously. They established that she was taking training with that dude at the end of series 1 more seriously.
Master Paku.
And also, it was set up at the end of series 1. That's not even a thing with this episode. At the end of that series, they said, well, he better start getting used to calling you master. So
yeah, they did. So I think.
What did you think of the love stuff?
Yeah, I
think
to love you,
baby.
It's handled interesting. It's handled interesting here because it's what they've done to sort of, because you don't want to move a plot like this along at too great a speed, right? If you're a writer and you're doing this episode and you think, and I'm not saying this is the end goal, but let's just say that the end goal is Aang and Katara together, right? And your job is to write an episode that pushes that a little bit forward. I think the fact this is a comedy episode gave them a lot more leeway to push it further than they would have, but it still not feel very serious, and like next week they're going to be a couple. Because in any other circumstance, those two having a moment where they literally kiss would be like, okay, this is a thing now for both of them, and it's going to have to be discussed and handled. Whereas this felt like, because the circumstances around it were so sort of awkward, and it was such a strenuous situation, and they were basically doing it to try and escape a situation, and it was all rooted in comedy, and that brilliant sequence when they're talking about it, and she's like, you know,
oh, that's great.
To when she's asking, like, when she sort of says, "Oh, would it be too mad if we tried that as a way to get out of here?" Because they were told that love would light the path or whatever, so they're like, maybe we should kiss. And Katara and Aang, and he's like, "Oh God, yeah, God, I wouldn't want to kiss you." She's like, "Well, I didn't realize it'd be that bad." He's like, "No, that's not what I mean. I just mean if it was a choice between kissing you or dying, then you know." And it's the whole thing is just a really good awkward conversation. They use the innate comedy of this episode to make light of it so that they can sort of nudge it forward, but not in a way that's so far that you think that next week they should immediately be discussing their relationship. Do you know what I mean? It's handled quite well. And also there's the other factor of Aang being younger than Katara, I think, which is becoming less noticeable as he gets a bit older and more mature, but certainly would have prevented them from doing maybe this plot in the first season. The first season more played it as Aang crushing on the slightly older girl, and her not paying attention because he's kind of a kid brother, like you know, kind of like she's almost like the babysitter. She's like, do you know what I mean? She's almost looking after him in the first season. But as he gets older and more mature, that balances out. So that it feels like they're sort of they've gotten to that point. But again, it's all done in the guise of comedy in this episode, which I think allows them to get away with a lot more than they would have otherwise.
Yeah, I mean they're not doing it with the nuance and depth of Anakin and Padme in Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, sure, but who's ever going to handle that as delicately and as beautifully as Lucas did?
I've told this story before, but I remember watching Attack of the Clones, and it was Anakin and Padme rolling around in the grass on Naboo. Was it Naboo? Or wherever they visited to hide her. And I remember reaching into my pocket and pulling out my ticket and looking down. Star Wars, Attack of the Clones, and then looking back up at the screen, and then looking back down at my ticket. Like, I just remember doing it. Like, it was such a revelation of, what is this?
I remember being
what is this?
Young and immature and saying obscene things about their relationships, and the woman with a child in front of us turning around and giving me and my mate very stern looks because we were just like, "Go on, Anakin!" Like just really immature, shitty things. Not like shitty in that way, but just like just crappy teenage boy crap.
Yeah, but yeah, so it's been handled.
I think it's handled very well.
It is handled well. I mean, I wouldn't like. I certainly feel like when I first watched this, I wasn't like, well, this needs to be addressed next week. It's all handled in sort of in jest, which is, I think, the perfect way to do this at this stage.
Mm.
Yeah.
I agree completely. And it's kind of like, I don't expect it to be picked up next week, nor do I think it needs to be. No. Like, they're just sort of, they're laying some seeds, you know?
Yeah, plant the seeds, let them grow.
Yeah, man. Yeah, completely. I think other than that, which I really love, like you, I really love the scene where he got all tongue-tied and stuff like that. And other than that, the highlight of the episode for me is definitely the comedy. So many jokes.
I stopped writing them
just
down
a good time.
Because we could literally do a podcast repeating the great jokes in this episode. Like, that's it. There are so many of them. It's ridiculous. Like, nobody reacted to what I'm about to say, but I think that came back with the Avatar is one of my favourites. Earlier on, when he describes them as river people. Because it's river people. They're like, no, we're not river people. He's like, what are you then? They're just like, people? He's like, hey, us too. Like, it's such a strange...
Even at the end. So are you going to come with us to the city? No? Okay, then.
Yeah. Gone through all of that. Yeah, and even on the other side of the story, like that opening moment with Iroh where he's talking about that plant and he's like, delectable tea or deadly poison? That's hilarious as well. That's really funny.
There's some other moments of depth as well, though, like the wonderful exchange between what was it? I can't remember now.
Zuki Poos. Old Zuki Poos.
Old Fire Dude Zuki Poos. That moment with her where she's like, they've hurt me too, and she shows him the scars was just like, like great TV.
Yeah, we could talk about that side of it. I think it's a really interesting idea.
Hold on, Dan. Dan. Do you mean you want to get deeper into the analysis other than great TV?
I mean, I thought about it.
I think we covered it.
Yeah. You're right. It's covered. Let's move on. What do you want from me? I forgot what I was going.
You were going to talk about it more.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I just think it's something that's worth noting. I think in a show like this is really important. Is we talked in the past about how this show does a really good job of sort of making it clear there's good and bad on both sides, right? But it's really interesting to see their prejudices against each other. Nadia pointed this out actually, and I was like, "That's a really yeah." I'm gonna steal that point and say it on the podcast like it's my own thought, because what she pointed out was it's the people of the Earth Kingdom are so convinced the Fire Nation are like united in their evil that she couldn't even conceive of the possibility that he was Fire Nation. That a Fire Nation person had hurt one of their own. Because it's so black and white to them. But the reality is, you have Zuko, who is a Fire Nation person now in the Earth Kingdom, experiencing, kindness at the hands of an Earth Nation person, an Earth Kingdom person. And having to level that with his own understanding of his heritage, what his own dad is doing. And his own goals, his own personal desires to be back at the right hand of his father. And I'm sure years and years of Fire Nation brainwashing, right? Like, telling him they're great and right and that, because no one thinks they're the bad guy, right? Like the Fire Nation soldiers were like told, right, we're going to be the baddies. So everyone go out and cause some chaos, take over some towns. Like they have they have a logic. They have something. The show hasn't explored it necessarily yet, but I'll tell you right now, they are doing this under a pretense. These invasions, they're not just generic bad guys. And I think putting Zuko in a position to sort of maybe get a glimpse that not everyone on the other side is terrible, the same way that people think everyone on his side is terrible, is a really clever thing to do at this stage while he's in flux, because he's been sort of, as they point out at the beginning of this episode, ousted by the Fire Nation, not particularly welcome as son of the Fire Lord in the Earth Kingdom, so he's at a loose end here, because he's not really, he is a true nomad, he's a nomad in the truest sense, because he's really a man of no nation now. He's between all these, he's in the middle of this war now. So where he's going to land is because he's in such an area of grey is fascinating. And having a comparison where we saw somebody else who'd been hurt by the Fire Nation, and that's the point. She's not wrong. He was hurt by the Fire Nation in more ways than he can probably count. So there's a real
in as much as he wasn't wrong when he said that his dad was in the war. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yes,
his dad is in the war.
Yeah, he's yeah. So it's a really powerful message. This episode slides in amongst all of the very funny moments, examining Zuko, and it's not. Look, it doesn't give us anything like crazy new that we didn't already know, but it's a really good clarification of where he is at right now, this episode. It's like there's hints of where he's emotionally at the end of the last episode, cutting off the ponytail and what have you. But this is the episode where they lay it out nice and clear, so everyone's on the same page and we truly understand where Zuko's coming from now.
And it thematically links to the cave and the two lovers as well. That's what I loved about it all. Like, you could, the two lovers could represent Zuko and the inner kind of struggle he's having. The two lovers could represent Zuko and Aang. Do you know what I mean? Like, I thought that was fascinating. Like, you could easily draw, at the very least, thematic similarities between those two. Which, you know, it's always good when the A plot complements the B plot, or there's parallels, you know?
Yes. Especially when they're separated by proximity. Like, they've done that in the show before, where there's been two plots that have been happening in completely separate locations, and they've created thematic parallels to make it feel cohesive instead of, you know, physical parallels where the characters meet up and stuff. And those are good too. Like, we both complimented, I think it was the Storm, maybe the episode after, where Zuko, as the Blue Spirit, frees Aang. That's those two plots physically coming together, right? But the previous episode, which had been, I think, the Storm, was those two separate, going through their backstories, and there was a non-physical connection between the two characters, but their backstories linked because they complemented each other. So the show is very conscious when it does a secondary plot of making sure that it fits with the rest of the cohesiveness of the episode. And when they don't have a way to do that, they just don't do it. There are just episodes where there's just no Zuki-Poo. Like, we're just like, he's just not here this week because he's not relevant to this story.
He's nicking a horse.
He's nicking a horse. But notice no Azula this week, because again, she'd have no thematic place in this episode and the point they're trying to make here. So they don't feel compelled to force characters into stories they don't belong into just to make sure that they remind you they're there. They trust you'll remember.
Yes, especially when they could, like, because there is a shot of the Fire Nation approaching, and, like, you know, that the Fire Nation dude who was like, no, it's too risky, shoot down the cave instead. That could have been her. Like, that could have just been her, but it you know, it isn't necessary, and you don't want to make the audience go, oh, well, where is she? So it's just someone else, which in turn makes you never want the Fire Nation to feel like it's, you know, one person. So I think that, you know, that helps them feel like a bigger threat. And I really like even that they, you know, for all their bravado, they'd heard the stories and weren't willing to dick about and risk it. Like, which says so much about the world, paints such a picture of the world.
Yeah, and not only does it paint such a picture of the world, but that's one of those jokes that I don't think I realised, really picked up on until there were two jokes in this viewing that I hadn't, like, pulled out and noticed before that really stuck with me on this particular viewing. And that's one of them. When the guy's like, haven't you heard the song? Which is just like that ridiculous song those hippies have been singing is like famous somehow, and the Fire Nation dudes have heard it and are too superstitious to go ahead and follow them into the cave.
That reminds me of another brilliant joke, and that bit comes after it, and like the context of the joke adds to that bit. When the guy goes, "Oh yeah, that was the end of the song, and they died."
Yeah. But it also, I mean, that's the same section that has the other great joke, which is that we've tangled with the Fire Nation a few times. We got this. And then you just see them running away from fireballs. And then it cuts back and Sokka walks past them going, secret cave it is. You know?
Which is a style of humour I don't think I've seen them do in the show before.
No,
like,
it's not.
A real,
yeah.
Like, almost, it wasn't this originally. It's been around for a lot longer than this, but it's almost that Family Guy-esque cutaway gag that they certainly at least made famous.
But the other joke that I don't think I've ever picked up on before, because this episode is so dense with jokes, I feel like every time I watch it, there's a joke I either sort of only half took in last time, or like just didn't appreciate as much. But the one that stuck out to me, other than the you crazy, you know, if you've not heard the song about the tunnel, the other one that blew my mind was Sokka just saying, look guys, I hate to be the wet blanket here, but since Katara is busy, I guess it's up to me. Which was just like, shots fired. It was like, Sokka was just like, I'm going to take this bitch down.
Yeah,
it was like Sokka like listened to that podcast we did last year where you kept accusing me of hating Katara because I was pointing out that she was a bit, you know, I mean I don't think I used the word wet blanket, but like there were certain elements to her character that were not like, did not make her the most fun to be around, and or the most fun to watch, I should say. And it's just like Sokka heard that and went, this one's for you, Dan, wink.
Like he turns to camera and goes, that's for you, Dan.
I hope you're enjoying your KFC.
Yeah, exactly. The only other thing I think I sort of had to say was just visually, the caves falling down.
Yes.
Some of the set pieces, but even just some of the shots, like the shot of them all like lounging against Appa and stuff, and the flowers are everywhere, and obviously the animation and the change in aspect ratio even of the story being told.
Yes.
Of when we see it go from paintings to that being told visually, some really, really nice. This episode, just for me, is a great example of Avatar's great visual storytelling and cinematography, and its amazing writing as well. At its core, this episode is both of those things. It's a fantastic script.
Yeah,
it's
it really
layered. And visually, it's wonderful.
Yeah, the moment they kiss as the torches go out, so you don't quite see it, and then it lights back up, and you do because So for those who don't remember, for anyone who might have not seen this recently, there's two different solutions to getting out of this. So they're trying to get to Omashu. We didn't do a recap at the top, which is my fault, or we did, but I did it badly.
I thought we did.
We did.
We did.
We may have done bad. Maybe I did it badly because I definitely didn't explain this part. On their way to Omashu, they get on this tunnel, they get separated, and there's two different solutions. Sokka and the musicians and the hippie guys get out by finding the badger moles that taught those two lovers how to earthbend. Not literally them, obviously they're descendants, I suppose. They still live in that mountain range, and they're blind, but they played music which they liked, so then they bashed their way out. But Katara and Aang take the song approach, which is to let love lead the way, and when they kiss, their torches go out, and it's the two lovers that had used these caves years ago to have their tryst before it all went tits up. They had evaded their families in these caves by having a secret way of lighting it, which is that if you turn off the lights, the cave is lined with special stones that light up in the dark, and no one would think to put out their torches to see it, and that would lead you out. And it just leads to visually an amazing moment when Aang and Katara kiss, but it does also lead to one of my favourite jokes of the episode, which is when Sokka says to Aang, "How did you get out?" And he goes, "We let love lead the way." And Sokka just goes, "Really? We had huge ferocious beasts lead our way."
Yeah.
Which is just... It's so good. It's all so cohesive. There isn't a beat missed. You're right. It's the script. It's tight. It's got some cool, stuff for visual storytelling. The jokes are tight. It's all part of a very cohesive story. It all links. It's just it's flawless. There isn't anything wrong with this episode, is there? It's basically perfect.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. I can't think of a single element to nitpick on it.
No, I really can't either. It's just perfect. It's so well balanced. It's so funny. It's got a bunch of heart to it, and it has a little bit of the sort of depth when we take a look at Zuko's situation, and even his choice at the end. It's not that's the other great thing. I think a lesser show would have had Zuko choose not to steal the horse at the end to show us he's learning, but he's still very conflicted.
It's a journey, though, isn't it? He's not there yet. He's not
right.
He's thinking about it.
He may get there, but I think a lesser show would have rushed us there with this episode, or would have at least given us a single ray of hope. He chose not to steal the horse in the end, and once Iroh said something, he was like, all right, and they walk off together, on foot, but he, it was, I think it was bold to just go, well, no, he's still, we may have had an excuse to show you here that their kindness got reflected in him. He sort of learnt from these people that were kind to him, and he was kind in return. But actually, no, they were kind to him, and he still rejected it. And that's bold as well. I think because there is definitely a version where they do it the other way around, and you believe it, and you go, okay, well, there's Zuko on one of his, on maybe a step to redemption, maybe. But this way round, it's clever.
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely. On Iroh, I'm conscious of time. We got to do Triv and a question and stuff, but maybe a few minutes discussion to make up for the KFC banter and us talking about return to work forms, which I don't know how appealing that's going to be to the masses. Do you think there's a danger that the more they do
15%,
stuff
Chris.
like
15%,
Huh,
I don't
sorry?
care. I'm a
The more they
15%,
do-
I don't care. Like it or go listen to a more sensible podcast.
Do you think there's a danger the more they do with Iroh, where like he says, but they've shown you great kindness, then he doesn't want him to steal the horse? Do you think? Because they do that a lot with Iroh. Iroh's often like the voice of conscience for Fire Dude, and do you think there's a danger that the more they do that, it's gonna reach a point where it's just like, why is Iroh even with the Fire Nation? Do you know what I mean? Like you feel like if Zuko turned around and said, you know what, let's become earthbenders and sack off the fire, he'd be like, okay. Like, and is there a danger where his backstory just suddenly begins to make less and less sense the more you pull on that thread with him?
There is a danger of that. I think you walk a fine line when you have a character like Iroh. But as I said earlier, one of the show's great strengths is showing there are good and bad people on either side of a war. I could be. My government could be committing atrocities. I wouldn't be responsible for that. My government are sort of committing atrocities, but more out of incompetence than anything else. But I mean, just like let's say,
Dan taking responsibility for the test and trace.
Yeah. But I just mean, like, if you live in a country like, I don't know, like if you're living in North Korea, which is a country that is, or China, a country that is committing potentially, well, not potentially, I mean. And I'm not trying to make this too political, but like China is obviously very politically, morally bankrupt country in many ways at the moment in some of the things they're doing. I'm not going to get too much into it. I'm trying to sort of say what I feel without going into the details because it's not what this podcast is for. My point is though, like I could have been born there and still feel the way I do here and now. I can't be responsible for my country, and I think that's what this show. I'd still be a citizen of that country regardless, and part of that culture regardless of my agreement with the political stance, right? And what this show does a great job of doing, and therefore negates this concern, and particularly I will little tease now, there is a little more to Iroh that explains his situation that we will learn going forward. But so the show is, you're right, that is I think a show with worse writing. That would be a pitfall they could absolutely tumble headfirst into. There is a real danger of that, to answer your question, 100%. But I'll tell you now, this show's writers are smarter than that. They've set up a world where it's less black and white than a story that would be like that would need to fall down that hole, if that makes sense. And then they do extra work, particularly with Iroh, to sort of give more context for his behaviour.
And what, again, is amazing and a huge compliment to this show is all of what you've just said thematically links to the tale of the two lovers in the cave.
Exactly. Yeah. It's one of the show's biggest messages, I think. I mean, and it goes, and you can trace it right back early, like season 1, the Jet episode when there's a Fire Nation dude and he's just an old man, totally innocent, and Jet's like, he's Fire Nation. I'm a bonk him on the head or whatever. I'm like, murder him. And it's like, are you out of your mind? He's just a harmless old man, just because he was born in the Fire Nation. What's that got to do with anything? And that is honestly one of the best messages this show ever gets across, and it does it in so many different ways. And it really does make a good point about, like, not judging a country for its, not judging a people by its country or its government or its policies. I mean, dear Lord, I hate the idea that to bring this into the real world context right now. I know people who are out living in Europe that are British, who have had, because they have British plates on their cars, have had their tyres slashed. Because Britain is being judged by the rest of Europe for Brexit, because Brexit has harmed Europe and therefore harmed all the countries in it. But those two people whose tyres they slashed did not vote for Brexit.
Yeah, they voted to remain, presumably. Yeah.
So it's a very poignant message today more than ever, and I would hate to think the fact that I don't like to think that Europe are judging every Brit now for damaging that union.
Yeah, but it's the same thing, isn't it? Not every European is slashing a tyre equally.
Well, exactly. And this is the problem. Yeah. It sounds me to think that some are, but I have to understand that others aren't. And it's the same with like like America. Like if I just looked at Trump and judged America as a people by him and his decisions, oh, America's racist now, I guess. I mean, half of America probably is. Statistically, it seems that way. But I wouldn't judge all Americans that way just because of who they voted president. So this is exactly what the show is looking at. And while it seems like a really simple idea, and I keep coming back to it, the show does such a good job of making it clear. And I think it's a good message for kids to take away. Don't judge someone based on X, Y, and Z. It's all down to the individual. And Iroh is a great, maybe the greatest example. Example of that in the show. I'll tell you right now, Chris. There was a little burp there. That was the hot wings returning to say hello.
There's that. If he'd have had 2 less hot wings, people, he wouldn't have been interrupted with that.
2 less, and I wouldn't have burped there. I tell you that.
What other notes or trivia have you got?
Well, let's talk about the ending. We haven't touched the ending yet. So the big reveal.
Oh yeah.
The big reveal. They finally make it to Omashu. I say finally. I bet you were a bit surprised when they were like, and here we are, Omashu. And you're thinking, 2 episodes in. Last season, it took you the entire season to get to the Northern Water Tribe. They're already at Omashu?
Nah, they did a good job of setting up that the tunnels would be a proper shortcut.
But did you not think in the grand scheme of the show, were you not going, but last season, like from a story perspective, the climax of the season was them reaching the goal. Are they not reaching Omashu very early in this season?
No, because, I think maybe if it weren't for Sokka's big, no distractions, no nothing, we're getting there. It's set up they're probably going to be there by the end of the episode.
Right, okay, fair enough. Which I
Stop
quite
trying to
like.
find a criticism, Dan.
What's that?
Stop trying to find a nitpick. It was glorious.
It is a really good episode. Yeah, okay. Well, it wasn't so much
best
nitpick.
episode ever.
It was more. I was actually going to. I suppose it was a compliment, really, because it's me sort of acknowledging the show, looking at the first season, and maybe learning from that, and going, well, there were times when it was like, do these kids not know the world depends on them completing this mission with reasonable urgency? Maybe don't stop off on Kyoshi Island to ride the penguins or whatever, the polar bear dogs or whatever, whatever the koi somethings, whatever mad mixture of creatures. So I thought it was clever of them to sort of set up in the very first episode, last week's episode, we're going to Omashu, and I think a viewer would be reasonable to go, that's this season's goal, the same way that going to the Northern Water Tribe was last season's goal, and then to be quite surprised when they reach it at the end of the second episode, only to discover the twist being Omashu has been Fire Nationed. So you'll remember when we went to Omashu last time, King Boomy and all that stuff, I explained to you there were 2 big cities in the Earth Kingdom that had yet to fall to the Fire Nation, Omashu being one of them, the other being Ba Sing Se. How did you feel to seeing poor King Boomy's kingdom come under such it's big old Fire Nation flags hanging, smoke coming off it. It's looking pretty rough.
I'd forgotten that they'd already been there and met that king. So it didn't hit me on that level. It's gonna be I could try and blag this, but I'm just gonna be honest. I'd forgotten that. So my reaction was, oh shit, Fire Nation. But now that you've said that, it's a bit more like, oh shit, Fire Nation.
Yeah, I mean it's that if you recall is the town where it's quite built up in like a triangle, and it's got all those chutes that go down. So when Aang got there,
is that like the postal thing, like the airport style chutes?
Yes. So Aang sort of was playing down those, and he met King Boomy, who was actually someone he knew as a kid. When they were both kids. So that's King Boomy's kingdom, and it's
it's a shame.
Yeah,
well, hopefully King Boomy is somewhere they can escape with him. He'll either get the town back or.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Have you got any ideas about where it goes? Well, I wanted to get your opinion on how you felt watching that, but apparently we're getting a live reaction on instead of you discovering that. But any theories on where it goes from here? Anything you think that they might be looking to do with this?
Well, I can only assume that they're keeping the Earthbenders' prison surrounded by a shitload of earth, and then Aang's going to give a little bit of a speech, and they're going to start kicking earth like footballs at the Fire Nation, and the Fire Nation are just going to retreat, and then it will start a montage of revolts.
Nailed it.
Boom.
Boomy.
Boom.
Hey. Hey. Boomy.
No,
What's his name?
I don't know. I mean, you got to assume you got to hope he's still alive, and that it will become about finding the prisoners.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm excited to watch the next couple episodes with you. I mean, season 2 for me is like the show at its like once it gets to its sort of like peak and just stays there now through to season 3. There's very little like there were a couple episodes last season we were like had a few, but I think the show it hits its absolute peak and stays there going forward. Now we're sort of in that area. There's a lot of really good stuff to come. Season 2 has some of my favorite stuff in it, so I'm very excited to move through it. Cool. Anything else you want to add before I move on to the Triv?
No. I made it. I loved it. I thought it was great.
Oh, I do have one other note. Actually, I really did enjoy Zuko's dinky fish. When you've gone fishing and you see the fish and and then they pull back and it's like it's the size of like his little finger.
Yeah. That was good.
Little Zuki Poo and his dinky fish.
That's the sequel.
That's the sequel. I also liked, by the way, that the two lovers from the story were called Omar and Shu. So Omashu. I thought that was
I thought that was very clever, actually.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. So, let's have a look. Anything else on the notes? I don't think so. No. Okay, so let's do the trip. There's not a huge amount of trip, but we'll get a little bit of trip out of the way. So the episode begins with a song or a melody from a song "Leaves from the Vine," which is a song that actually comes back later in the season. I thought I'd mention it now because I'm never going to remember that it was briefly in the instrumentals of this episode. So anyone who knows what that song is knows what that song is. If you don't, then fine. At one point, Chong says, "The tunnels, they're a-changing," which is a direct reference to Bob Dylan's "Times They Are A-Changing." Which is
nice.
Another little hint that they're sort of kind of a sort of a hippie like analogy built into these characters. Chong's belief of focusing less on the destination of a journey and more on the journey itself is similar to Taoism, a belief that the path is the destination. Which is a very eloquent way of putting that.
Yeah.
So the story of two lovers, obviously, and their rival families, is a play on Romeo and Juliet. We already kind of mentioned that, but it's in the Triv. I'm reading it. I'm saying it out loud. And when Aang and Katara enter Omar and Shu's tomb, the pictures that tell their story are sort of a play on Egyptian hieroglyphics and Egyptian culture, which makes a certain amount of sense because obviously as being earthbenders, they wouldn't have necessarily needed to carve those. You assume a certain amount of being able to bend the earth to sort of create that tomb and those shapes. You assume. So there you go. That's the Triv. I don't have anything else.
Oh, that was it. Nice. Good Triv.
Oh, man.
Have we got a fan question?
I'm starting to think that I'm getting 15% back. I think that's what's...
What, from me or from the Triv?
From you. Well, I just silence.
I thought there'd be more. Like, sorry, but I rarely. The Triv sometimes it's just like, yeah, that's cool. What more?
I don't know, Chris. Find something. Dig deep. Give me 110%.
Look. If I'm giving you 50% of the Triv on the Triv, that's consistent with the rest. I'm always. There are times when I'm not even listening to the Triv.
Oh, I can believe that. Right. So we have a listener question. We do. So for those who didn't listen to Rewind Reviews, we started doing listener questions where we ask on Patreon for a listener to give us questions. And one of our Patreons, the Jackie one, or that Jackie one, gave us a ton of questions. She gave us a bunch of this or that, where it's like this thing over this thing. I think the last one we did, which was on the last episode, I think, of Rewind Reviews, was like Clarissa Explains It All or Sabrina. So we're going back. So what we'll do is, because she asked so many of them and they're all really good, we're going to dabble them in between the other listener questions, because quite frankly we don't get that many, and we've got 20 episodes of this series to get through, and I want to have enough questions. Honesty
Fair.
time. So, this week's one from Jackie, and thank you, Jackie, for sending these. They're all excellent. I can't remember what we decided. I think we decided Sabrina in the end on the last one.
We did, yep.
Yeah. So this one's quite a British one, but a good one nonetheless. Robot Wars or Crystal Maze?
We talking the entire franchises, or we talking, remake Robot Wars and remake reboot Robot Wars?
Does that change the answer for you?
No, I mean it's still Crystal Maze, but still. Clarify.
Yeah, so I guess what do they call that in America? They call it battle bots in America, Robot Wars. So America, you do have Robot Wars, but you call it battle bots. I don't think America have an equivalent to the Crystal Maze. It's a very weird game show from the UK where usually a quite eccentric man, depending on the area watching it, would lead around a bunch of people in jumpsuits through a pretend spaceship and a pretend jungle and a pretend set where there's several games they have to volunteer to go play based on like skill and technique and all that stuff and intelligence, and every time they win they gain crystals which give them more time in a giant crystal at the end of the episode to try and win money, because there's all this paper blowing about, they have to catch it and put it through slots, and there's gold and silver, and the silver get deducted from the gold or something like that. It's a British pastime. Like it was a huge hit over here. It was like, I can't even describe. It was appointment TV at one point, in like the 90s, right? Like it was this absolute phenomenon in this country that just seems to have gone nowhere else. I don't think there's like even an American version of it, which is crazy because they end up making most of this stuff, don't they? Like
yeah, completely, yeah. But it is great, and I was just never particularly a Robot Wars guy, in my wheelhouse, I suppose. But even as a kid, never particularly watched Robot Wars. But certainly as a young kid, and now as an adult, enjoying, Richard Aderwadi's run in the Crystal Maze and the classic series when I was younger. Like I remember excitedly watching the Crystal Maze with my sister, and I think, because different people tackle different challenges in different ways and have different dynamics with each other. Mm-hmm. I think to give some analysis other than I just watched Crystal Maze more and preferred it, I would say that Crystal Maze, even when it's repeated challenges, I think in my memory at least, becomes less the same thing every episode because everyone approaches everything so differently. Then again, different styles of robots, different stories behind the creators of those. Maybe that's me being unfair to Robot Wars because I never really watched it. But with an acknowledged bias, I would go Crystal Maze.
Yeah, I'm in a tricky situation because I absolutely loved Robot Wars as a kid as well as the Crystal Maze. I think I'm going to have to ultimately lean Crystal Maze because Crystal Maze is proven to have more staying power, I think, because of probably what you said. Like there's more variation in what you can do with the Crystal Maze. Each room can have a completely different puzzle, and it never gets old seeing the teams get mad at each other for failing in certain tasks and stuff, and there's so many different dynamics.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, they have always been very good with the casting. I've just looked it up, by the way. They did do an American version, Chris, but only in 2019. It lasted just 10 episodes. It got commissioned by Nickelodeon, and it was actually filmed on the British set, and they sent over Adam Conover to present it, who I'm a huge fan of. He does a show called Adam Ruins Everything that's excellent, and I'm now very curious about the Adam Conover version of the Crystal Maze, even though they only made 10 episodes.
Yeah, you'll have to check that out.
That sounds fun. But they've always had a good run. Like they had Stephen Merchant do one, and then the most recent series they've been doing have all had Richard Ayoade, but back in the day, obviously Richard O'Brien was sort of the classic host. He did a wonderful job. There was another guy in between who I've forgotten about, but Crystal Maze has clearly had staying power because while Robot Wars has come back in various guises over the year, it never feels like it's had the success it had originally again, whereas the recent reboot that they've had with Richard Ayoade in the UK seems to do quite well and is quite popular. So I have to acknowledge the staying power and variation you get with Crystal Maze, but I was obsessed with Robot Wars as a kid. Hypnodisc the best robot ever. All about Hypnodisc.
Have you? I don't know those words. But
it was a
I'm
robot.
pleased for you.
Look, basically, I think they've adjusted the rules in years since, because it was basically cheating. It wasn't cheating, but it was so overpowered, it was insane. It basically had a big disc on its top, and once that disc spun up to its full RPMs, if that disc went anywhere near your robot, it would shred it to pieces.
Nice.
Instantly.
Have you heard Daniel Sloss talking about? I think he talked about it on Richard Herring's podcast, talking about how his dad like took some technology from his work or something, and they literally banned them from using it. They were like, "This isn't safe. You should not have this."
That's amazing.
Yeah, you have to. I think he talks about it on Richard Herring's podcast. But yeah, hearing him talk about it, that's an entertaining story.
That's very funny. Yeah, no, they have had to change the rules over the years to stop certain things being allowed because they're so dangerous. And to be fair, Robot Wars' most successful sort of reboot was when America redid BattleBots in sort of like the early to mid 2010s. Like, I think it was like, I don't know, it was 2012 maybe. They sort of did a BattleBots reboot that was really good. I remember watching that entire first season of that. So, I don't know, maybe I'm talking out my ass. But yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to go Crystal Maze for the weirdness of the eccentric presenters and just the weird commitment that game show has to its fake reality. Like, they're pretending they're going to all these worlds, and they really do pretend that they're on a spaceship and in a jungle. And I don't know why. Like, it's so pointless. Why would you not acknowledge it's a game show? It's really weird. I don't think this...
Yeah, but I think that adds to the quirkiness of it.
Yeah, so it definitely does. So there you go. So yeah, Jackie, there we go. We've answered your question. We've both gone Crystal Maze. It's a unanimous decision, but with a little bit of a pang of regret. Not regret, but like, I don't know, sort of like... I'm slightly saddened because I do also quite love Robot Wars. So there you go. If you'd like to ask us a question, and please God do. We have 20 episodes of this to get through. We need them. Now I have got a really good one that I've put aside for later in the series because it references a character that we in this show that you haven't met yet, Chris. So I'm going to wait till we get a little bit further in the season. But yeah, you can go to the Patreon, and for as little as $1 a month, you are able to both get episodes 1 week early. There is an RSS feed where episodes of Analysing Avatar and Rewind Reviews go up a week ahead of their actual release. So if you're listening to this via Spotify or iTunes, you can hear next week's episode right now by going over and giving us, again, as little as $1 a month. Gives you access to all that good stuff, including there'll be a thread posted. If you just look down a little bit, that asks for anyone who wants to supply questions. It also gives you access to our Discord, where you can ask questions in the special Patreon section of the Discord called the Yellow Lounge. You're welcome to throw questions in there too. I see them all. It's very good. We have a good time in the Discord. It's good fun. So except for Chris, who forgot his password.
Yeah, when it comes to the Discord, I'm very 15%.
Do you eat too much KFC?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, every time I go to reset my password, I just eat a KFC, and I just like, oh, no, I need to. I do off weekly. There is definitely at least one moment a week where I go, oh fuck, I really should get back on the Discord.
And then you think, yes, yeah, but 2 hot wings too many.
Exactly, but then I think I've just eaten too many damn hot wings.
Cool. So, so if you want to get us in there, you can. It's the RSS feed is the best. Like, I was always like, I don't know if anyone could be going to the trouble of downloading these episodes and putting them on their device manually in order to get them a week early. It's a lot of like extra steps to do the Discord, not the Discord, through the Patreon. But now we've got the RSS feed that you can just sort of subscribe to on whatever your normal podcast app is, and have the episodes just automatically streamable on your phone when they're released a week early. That's that's really neat. So if anyone's interested, patreon.com/nothingbutstatic. You can also get us in all the usual places, nothingbutstatic.co.uk. If you want to see like listings of our other podcasts, Nothing But Static. You can also get Nothing But Static, Analysing Avatar, Stephen University, Fringe Observers, Overanalyzing the Garden Wall, this, and Rewind Reviews, all through any of the normal podcasting apps, and you can review them in those places. So if you want to give us a thumbs up or some stars or a like or a verbal review that just says Baby Zuki Poo or whatever, get on it. We'd love it. Also, youtube.com/nothing-but-static-UK. Give us a little sub over there. There's some content that goes on that channel that isn't available elsewhere, such as, particularly at the moment, it's the Infinity Train rambling reviews that I'm releasing, where I'm basically going through Infinity Train episode by episode and reviewing it. Completely blind, haven't seen the rest of the season, which is killing me because I'm having to watch it at the pace I'm recording the podcasts, which is not fun. And Chris had a little cameo on this morning.
Welcome to me watching every amazing animation of the last 10 years.
Yeah. So yeah, it's there's a ton of stuff on that YouTube channel that we haven't that's not available elsewhere. And obviously on the Patreon, we haven't even mentioned this on the Patreon. You've got the bonus podcast, Nothing But Claps, which I still think is one of the funniest, weirdest things we've done, and I still really like how that turned out. And I'm excited to do the sequel episode to that. So yeah, I think that's all. I've covered all the stuff. Oh yeah, Twitter @Dan Doolan @C Billingham. So if you have something to say and you don't want to stick it in the YouTube comment section because, who would? You're welcome to get us on Twitter. YouTube's scary. There's some crazies on YouTube. We don't get a lot of them in our comment section, thankfully, but occasionally.
A friend phoned me the other day to respond to something because he was like, yeah, I listened to it on YouTube, but I ain't fucking commenting on YouTube. So I clicked on your Twitter, and it's clear you never use that either, so I'm just phoning you. I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah, so well, Chris doesn't use Twitter very much, but I do. I'll respond if you tweet at me. There is an @nothing-but-static without the G on Twitter, but we don't really use that anymore. So, tweet at that at your own risk of waiting 4 months to get a response. There was a tweet that someone said was at Christmas that I saw the other day, and it's April for us recording this now. It's the 23rd of April. So, just calling them back, tweeting them back, just like, sorry, it's taken 4 months. What a dickhead. 15%. Anyway, so thanks very much for listening, guys. We do appreciate you. Obviously, come back to us in a week. We're very excited to talk about the next episode. But in the meantime, I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
We'll see you in a week's time when we discuss Return to Omashu.